Welcome to the Recommended Daily Value Podcast, your daily dose into the health and wellness world.
Welcome back to the Recommended Daily Value Podcast, where we dive into everything health, fitness, and nutrition related 5 days a week in 5 minutes or less. This podcast is brought to you by Umzu, and I'm your host, Tyler Woodward. If you're not already subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, because today's topic of the day is raw milk, to drink or not to drink. If you're like me, you've probably heard both sides of the story. On one hand, raw milk is a superfood and everyone should only drink raw milk, while on the other, you have people saying that no one should ever drink raw milk as it will kill you and it's unsafe to drink. So let's get to the bottom of this. Let's start off with the easy argument against raw milk. I think the biggest argument against raw milk is that some people just don't do well with raw milk. While there's a ton of people that swear they can't process any dairy outside of raw milk, there's some that are the opposite for whatever reason. And that pasteurization process seemingly saves their digestive system. There's also the risk of food poisoning. Anytime there's bacteria contained within a food, there's always going to be a risk of contamination and the resulting food poisoning that can occur from it. You've likely heard of salmonella, but other common contaminations are from norovirus, E. coli, etc., which result from certain bacteria being present in or on our food. The issue with this argument is that a lot of other foods can also cause food poisoning, and even pasteurized dairy can cause food poisoning, although it's typically much less likely. While there is some research which found that pasteurized dairy is a lot safer than raw dairy, I would contest this point to some degree. The thing about raw dairy is that quality is king. You need to make sure that if you're going to eat raw dairy, it needs to be from a source that you trust, which is arguably the biggest advantage of raw dairy. Raw milk is probably one of, if not the most scrutinized foods from the government. So if a raw dairy farm is found to be the cause of a food poisoning, their sales will be shut down pretty much immediately. Basically, this means that raw dairy farms have to keep their cows in tip-top health in order to ensure their dairy is safe for consumption. And why, in my experience, all raw milk farms are pretty much exclusively grass-fed. In contrast, you can get away with a lot less healthy cows when you pasteurize the dairy, killing all the bacteria in it, both the good and bad bacteria. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that raw milk, intended for pasteurization, often contains pathogens. But back to pasteurized dairy being safer, I think it most certainly is when the dairy is derived from an unhealthy cow. But just like you don't eat meat from a sick animal, you shouldn't eat dairy from a sick cow. Now, on to the other advantages. One of the proposed advantages of raw milk, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I think is interesting nonetheless, is that the protein, specifically the whey within it, isn't denatured. So when you heat up protein normally, it loses its shape, which can cause it to lose its function. But that's going to happen anyway when we digest it, so I'm unsure how this affects us. It's possible that this pre-denatured whey is more difficult to digest, which could explain why a lot of people can tolerate milk, but not whey or casein, the milk proteins. But regardless, I'm not sold on that one. One of the other advantages is that raw milk is more nutritious than pasteurized milk. This is from the quote-unquote Raw Milk Institute, and they found that pasteurization reduces the bioavailability of calcium and phosphorus, how much we can actually absorb, reduces the presence of copper and iron, it reduces vitamins A, B complex, the B vitamins, C and E. It destroys beta-lactoglobulin, which is a protein, thereby decreasing the intestinal absorption of vitamins A and D. And it inactivates beneficial enzymes, which potentially may help to digest milk, keep it fresh for longer, and absorb more of the nutrients. Although honestly, most of these effects, while statistically significant, are not huge. As in, yes, you may absorb slightly less calcium, but it's not like pasteurized milk is not a good source of calcium. The only ones that may potentially be of concern here is retinol or vitamin A, and potentially B2 or riboflavin, which is heat sensitive. Last, but certainly not least, the pasteurization process intentionally destroys the probiotics or bacteria in the raw milk. The probiotics in raw milk seem to be very beneficial in helping to shape the gut microbiome and potentially even helping to digest the milk itself. There's not much evidence to support this, at least as far as I'm aware of, but it makes sense to me that since raw milk naturally contains lactase or lactose-consuming bacteria, it's possible that these bacteria, when ingested, could help you digest the lactose better. Theoretically, again, not entirely sold on it. All that being said, I do find it pretty ironic that in a lot of the yogurts today, they're adding bacteria or probiotics back in after they intentionally kill all of that bacteria, which seems a bit backwards to me, but what do I know? And as an honorable mention, a lot of people anecdotally digest raw milk a lot better. Whether that's from it being better quality, the probiotics, undernatured whey proteins, no one really knows, but a lot of people swear by it. Well, that's it for this episode, and I do just want to let you guys know that personally I am a huge fan of raw milk and do go pretty far out of the way to get it myself. But if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share it with a friend. And remember, these opinions are my own, based on my own research and experiences, and it's not medical advice. Till next time, be good.